very relaxed, totally different from Tokyo. Thank you very much. So today I will talk about my buildings. I will show you 5 projects in total. The title is New Critical Space. Actually, the architect is people who create the space of the building. But I think recently building becomes a sort of tool for the society, right? Of course, the building is, any building is social things, of course, I know. But yeah, especially in these 10 years, people recognize building as a kind of object for human society, like a big machine. Okay, it's I would propose to say there's 2 types of space in our planet. One is actual space for human society, let's say, and the other is a critical space for building culture. But recently, this actual space, this real space, is too strong, and the pressure from the society is getting strong. So I would propose to separate 2 kinds of space. Critical space is kind of exists in another level from the actual space. So I try to say how we can make a building which can have which can hybrid of the actual space and the critical space in a nice way, right? So what I'm doing in all project is to make new echo between these 2 spaces. I have to show 5 projects in total in order to explain you this new echo more concretely. First project is in the weekend house near Tokyo. It's 3 hours by car from Tokyo, weekend house. And what I did is to make a very high pilotis in the forest, in the middle of the forest. It has 6.5 meters. It's very high. It's like a 3-story building. Because in this area, which is it's in rainy season in June, July, they have a large amount of rainy season. So every building, every vernacular building has a sort of pilotis. We call it in Japanese takayuka. It has always 1 meter or 1.5 meter. And they use it for the machine space or sometimes garage for car and so on. So they use it for such things. But, okay, I started like this. Okay, let's use this pilotis as a language of this building, but in a different way. It's not about for the machine or car. New space of the pilotis for the living in the nature. This is a plan, very simple. The ground floor is only semi-outdoor space, just a big bench and a table and stairway. And second floor is also very simple, which has a terrace and the dining, kitchen, and the bedroom. But the second floor is very, very low ceiling. I forgot to tell. It has only 1.7 meter in the bottom of the beam. So it's really like an attic space, very intimate space, in contrast to the pilotis space in underneath. So, it's really low, but it has a very huge window in every direction. So that's why they can forget this intimacy at the same time. Okay, this is built in the forest. It has 6.5 meters height. For me, this height is really important because, yeah, in the process, I always develop the project in a model. I check the hundreds of models and compare with each other. And when I see the 5 meters or 7 meters, it's too low or it's too high. For example, the 5 meter looks, this space becomes very architectural. It's defined from the ceiling. Or when I see the 7 meters, I notice that this purity space starts melting in the forest, right? So this proportion, 6.5 meters, is a kind of a in-between proportion which can coexist the nature and architecture. That's the important things. And yeah, it's made by simple structure of the steel column and the brace. And the upper floor is made by very simple, low-cost timber frame in Japan. When you look up, you can see the light, soft light from the terrace, right? For me, the proportion of the purity is important, and also the proportion of this beam was also so important. Imagine to make a concrete building like Corbusier or Lina Bobardi in the forest. I like Lina and Corbusier, but in such a nature, I think it's too strong. Somehow I tried to find a good relation between this such an element and the branch and the leaves in the nature. So this proportion, it has only 38 millimeter as a beam. This continuity of the scale of the element is really important. Okay, so you can climb up just beside the tree like a monkey. And yeah, this is from the stairway. On the upper floor, you can notice, yeah, it's very intimate space, but at the same time, I put a super huge window, which almost attacking to the nature. So, yeah, it's really connected to the surroundings. It has a terrace, and I put the dining table on the glass top, so you can check the children playing on the underneath. This is a living space. I think you can experience, you can feel the sense of scale in this movie. This is from the table and from the hammock. You know, when you wake up in the morning, I don't like to make just a weekend house which stay just inside and look beautiful outside. No, let's be more active to the nature. Let's find a new way of living in the nature. So when you wake up in the morning, you make a breakfast with your friend and bring in underneath. And in the daytime, most of the daytime, you spend the time in this semi-outdoor space in the nature. Okay, so I will explain the 3 things in the important topic in my whole project. One is proportion. I explained about the proportion of this purity space or beams or column. Every element, the proportion of every element is really important to make a new relationship between building and nature, body and environment. And also gravity is one of the important topic. We are architects, we are not a magician, so we cannot erase the gravity itself. But I believe we architects can shift the sense of gravity of the space. For example, with the proportion or pitch of the beams and the proportion of the column, which shift the image of the gravity, right? And the last one is the time. Time is really important. Yeah, for example, the changing of the time in this space, or building has a sort of various type of material, so each material has a sort of time, or the purities. This architectural element, purity, have plenty of time in the history. I don't know when the human beings start to use the purity, but in a way, I'm really fascinated to this the architectural element like purities, roof or window, which can have a lot of wisdom inside. It's plenty of time inside, right? I really like to think about such a long time or various type of time in building. I will show you the next project in Tokyo. It's a residential area in Tokyo, very small house. You know, in Tokyo, we were living in a super small site. In this building, it's Ikomazawa. It's a very nice area in Tokyo for the residents. And the size of the plot is only 66 square meters. This is the plan. Always the plan is simple. Ground floor is almost like one room. It's just a living room. And the upper floor is, I call it a study room, washing space, and the bedroom with balcony in the south side. Very simple. But what I did is in a section. Always section is important. I did two things. One is to make a very high living room on the ground floor. It's almost like the last project in the Filipino forest. In order to get much more sunlight in the ground floor, because in Tokyo it's very crowded. It's so dense. So the ground level, the condition of the ground level is really difficult to keep it. So I make almost a kind of tolerant space, which has a very big scale as a living space. And second thing, this outline of the building, which has a gable roof, it's totally defined from the regulation. So this shape is same with the neighbors almost. So this high ceiling of the ground floor would create a very low upper floor, almost like an attic space, right? But a second thing I did in the section is to make a very, very sensitive floor. Actually, there's a gap between the beams, so almost like a deck, like a louver. I put the skylight on the top, so natural sunlight and wind is coming through this floor. Or from this study room, you can look down to the street through the floor. So, you know, the second story building, it has a very, very big division between underfloor and the upper floor, right? But in this project, I tried to interact between the two floors. I checked the pitch of the floor with the leg of the daughter of the client. And the client asked me to make a wood building, but it's not interesting to use a normal material like a cedar or so on. So I made a big research in all over the world, and finally I could find this wood from Australia. It's a eucalyptus. It's a wood of koala, you know. Eucalyptus is super strong. It's really dense. It's very heavy. So in this area, it's a bit rich area. So another building has a brick or stone in the exterior wall. But somehow this eucalyptus, if it's wood, but it looks almost like a brick, right? I like this two sense of material. It is wood, but at the same time, it looks heavy, almost like a brick. This is the facade of house in Komazawa. I took this in last year. It's already 7 years old. It's almost like a silver. So when the window opened, you can recognize this sensitive floor. This is a ground floor living space. I put this huge window. This height was very important. This is 1.28 meters. It's like this. Because in front of this building, there's a lot of passengers. But somehow he wants to see the pram garden in front. So this height, this tension from inside and outside was super important. And somehow I tried to find the proportion of this window. Very simple room, which is just a big window. Okay, you can recognize the wind and the sunlight is coming through from above. Here is a study room. From the study room, you can look down to the living room. Or this is a daughter's space. There's a lot of stuff from her. And you can see a bit, maybe you cannot see, but there's a street here. So when passenger or car pass through in front of this house, even if this is very private and intimate space, but immediately you can feel and experience the public space in outside of the house through this sensitive floor. So this is private, but at the same time, it's totally open to the public. The client organized the event like a music concert in such a small house. But acoustic is really good thanks to this timber. Unfortunately, I can show you only 5 projects today, so please check the clock keys. It's published in 3 months ago. Next project is an apartment in Nerima. It's an apartment project, rental apartment for young people. This area is really close to the center of Tokyo. It's 20 minutes by train to the center, the business area. But at the same time, in this neighborhood, there's 3 universities. So my client, he's a very clever guy. He expects to have both residents, so young businessman and young student. Also, he's clever, and he asked me to make a variation between the apartment because it's strange. The businessman and the student would live in same plan, same space, same apartment, right? And also he asked me another request. Please make something different things from others, because already in this street, the plenty of apartment already exist, and actually many empty room already. So he noticed, yeah, we need something new way of living in Tokyo, let's say. Okay, it's nice request. But on the other hand, I immediately recognize in a rental apartment, I cannot talk, I cannot discuss with residents because this is a rental apartment. I cannot meet with the resident directly, right? So it's strange to start to make a sort of a puzzle of the space in order to make a variation or strange shape instead of I don't know the resident in the future. Okay, so I changed my mind, but somehow let's make a proportion, the variation between the apartments. let's make a variation instead of the space. This is normal apartment in Tokyo. Instead of the plan space itself, let's make a variation with a balcony in front. Because in Tokyo, the balcony always in south side and nobody use it. This is just for the function and for the regulation. Okay, so let's activate this balcony. It's totally dead in reality. Okay, let's make a very tall balcony or very long balcony or L-shaped balcony, right? The concrete 7 stories apartment. First one is the L-shaped terrace. It has L shape as it is. But when you open the door, it's not room, but terrace. It's still outside. And when you open this second door, you can finally enter the inside. So this L shape and it's connect to the bathroom. So from inside, this balcony, L-shaped balcony would work as a buffer zone between inside and outside. So you don't have to put the curtain in this window because it's enough gap between the city and the inside, right? And next one is a tall terrace type. The space itself is very small, like 10 square meter and 3 stories and so on. And the terrace is not big, but it's very high, like 8 meters. It has 3 stories, super simple, compact apartment. So, for example, he used the first floor as a kitchen and working space, and terrace in front. This is a working space and there's a stairway. And the second floor is bathroom, just bathroom. So on the floor, I put the bathtub and the toilet directly. So you can enjoy the bath time just beside the tree on the terrace. And the top floor is only bedroom. So when you can wake up to the you can look down to the street like this through this very tall balcony. So thanks to such a various type of balcony, various proportion of the balcony terrace, every residence can have a various way of connect to the surroundings. When you wake up, you can look down to the street like this, or when you eat in the breakfast, you can look up to the sky, right? Thanks to this various proportion of the terrace, there's a dynamic relationship between inside and outside. And the next project is my first project in outside of Japan. It's in Italy, actually. It's finished in last year. It's a chapel in a cemetery. Guastalla is a super small city near Parma, Verona, Modena, around there, north of Italy. And it's a very beautiful city of the Renaissance. And they asked me to design the new chapel for the public cemeteries because in Italy or in Europe, they start to change the style of the ceremony from the burial to the cremation. So they need a sort of new chapel for the scattering ashes after the ceremony, right? And they give me the one courtyard in public cemetery. Okay. And we have already a sponsor of this project who is a marble company in Italy. And the guy gave me the 2.5 massive stone, massive marble. For Japanese, it's really impressive to make something space in with stone because we have a tradition of the wood. Okay, so let's make a space only made by stone. Okay, we have some references. One is, of course, cave. I like cave because it's really protected, but at the same time, it connects directly to the outside. So it's protected, but totally open, right? And I like also this combination, especially we can see in Europe, in castle and so on. There is a niche in the wall, and they put a bench and a window. So this is a set of the element besides the window. I like it very much. And in Italy, especially in Italy, on the facade of the chapel, they have this element called nicchia facciata. This is a half dome-shaped niche on the facade. And they put the statue in the middle. Okay, because this is a cemetery, this can be a nice reference. So at first we found the how to cut the massive stone and how to create the many number of the pieces. And this is a plan, so horizontal section. What I did is super simple things. Okay, let's dig. Let's make a one dig to this each pieces. So it has a 38 centimeter like this, and I dig in one time. Of course, not me, but the machine dig it. But in a way, dig very precisely. So this is 38 centimeter, but in the minimum point, in the most thinnest part, it's only 1 centimeter. Because I expected this part can be a window. This is a section. So I dig in one time, and it has 45 centimeters, so it can bench. The people request me to make a bench in this chapel because a lot of older people participate on it. So this is bench, and it almost like a niche. And on the back side of the niche, there is a semi-transparent window, which has only 10 millimeter. This is a facade, and I made a mock-up by the styrofoam. And surprisingly, the transparency of the marble and the styrofoam is almost the same. And yeah, they cut very precisely. Yeah, it's very impressive. The Italian construction is super precise. The edge is only 5 millimeter. This is a guy. He looks proud of it. And in last summer, finally, the construction started. But it's very simple. We just put on the ground, right? Most easiest construction. They put on the ground little by little. And this is the final piece. This is the entrance of the arch pieces. Dun. So this is a chapel. It's finished. From the entrance, of course, the proportion of the arch is the same with the arch in the entrance of the existing cemetery. And it's coming close. And you can recognize the semi-transparent light. And in the changing of the time, the sunlight is always, of course, changing. So all the time, the brightest part is changing in every hour, right? So this is a bench, niche, and window. So from the south, it looks like just a massive marble, one piece of massive marble, right? But when you turn, you can recognize the window. I'm happy some Italian people says it looks like a Japanese paper, this semi-transparency. This is from the north. So this is in the morning, so you can recognize this part. The west part is the most brightest now. And also south part. Okay, this is the final project I will show, but the time passed already. So I will show you in the next time, or you can check it in El Croquis. Thank you.
Hola. Hola a todos, les pedimos que tomen asiento. Para mí es un honor presentar a nuestra última conferencista del bloque de esta mañana del martes 20 de marzo en la quinta edición de MEXTRÓPOLI. Estamos muy contentos de recibir a Petra Blaise. Petra Blaise comenzó su carrera como artista en 1978 en el Museo de Stedelijk en Ámsterdam, en el Departamento de Artes Aplicadas. De 1986 en adelante, trabajó como diseñadora de exposiciones y ganó distinción por sus instalaciones relacionadas con arquitectura. Su trabajo se destaca por el uso de textiles, luz y acabados en espacios interiores, en el diseño de jardines y paisajes. En 1991 fundó el estudio Inside Outside, en el cual ha colaborado con distintos arquitectos y diseñadores, destacando sus proyectos de interiorismo y paisajismo en edificios de OMA. Por favor, les pido que demos la bienvenida a Petra Blaise.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so proud to be here. Well, let me start. I can't really see you, so that's a pity, actually. So Inside Outside, we're a team. We're a team of about 10, 12, 14 people, and we call it interdisciplinary, which is the new word, but anyway, we're from different creative disciplines. And that makes it hugely playful. We work, of course, with climate, both because we work with textiles a lot, and textiles are also dependent on climate, on humidity, and such things, and UV light, but also with landscape and planting, as you understand. And I started to do, well, to work, to influence space when I worked at the Stedelijk Museum in the 70s and 80s, then became exhibition designer, and then started to also influence interior spaces. And in 2000, we had a show at Storefront in New York. And I think from 1987 to now, we are actually looking at the curtain and seeing how it can be emancipated. So emancipated from, you know, the cliche of covering a window to becoming something independent or different, and of course very technical. So this is our studio until today, and here you see the curtain walloping outside because of its light weight, and forming shapes, each time different, something that digital architecture cannot do, because it looks soft, but it isn't. And we are obsessed, of course, with the connection of inside to outside, which is nothing new because of modern architecture. There is this transparency and fluidity from one space to the next. So that is, of course, very important for us. And so if we work in urban planning or with architects, we always make this kind of sketches if, you know, depending on the site. We always work very site-specific. This was for Riga, a very cold climate, where you can really imagine gardens to be anywhere, or at least the experience of the outside, the experience of weather and time being everywhere, but also influencing the climate inside with certain interventions. So the inside and outside can be the countryside to the city, or it can be a building, and of course it goes both ways. So it's about experiences from inside out, but also from outside in, and that can be a large scale or small scale. Anything is inspiration, of course. This was really a beautiful view. I'm sure you all know it, but I saw it for the first time. Yeah, so always looking at how you experience a building coming nearer from the street or from the city or through a landscape, and how, when you are inside, how you experience the exterior. And of course, Seattle Library was a very good example, working with OMA on both the landscape and all the interior finishes, and taking actually the planting literally in, and creating carpets with images that I make myself of plantings. I have an enormous archive because I love to take pictures of plants and in their different conditions and different seasons. And here, translating them into actually a textile garden, so from a vegetable garden to a textile garden, and playing with scale so that actually the really heavy furniture of a library through the scale of the imagery becomes very lightweight. So the fascination also of the threshold between inside and outside, and how with screens or very thin screens, well, you saw it just now, you can do it with opening up floors, but you can also do it in the vertical realm, that you see something, but that something can disappear according to the light. And so it can, catch your attention or not catch your attention. And the same thing could be done, of course, with plantings. And even with very heavy textiles, still there's always this escape and looking through. And in making openings, you can also draw, which here is very obvious, for the synagogue in Amsterdam, where we drew with little openings the very old tree, symbolizing wisdom and knowledge. And on the other side, which you don't see, we have little twigs of the youth and so the two generations communicating to one another, one on the west side, one on the east side. But also with graphics, you can communicate on curtains, telling something about the institute where you are, which is very important here in a bank. By the way, it used to be Banco Popular, but it went broke, and now it is Banco Santander. Still the same curtain. And the curtain here, you can't see it, it's very abstract, but it tells about all the symbolisms on the euro, the European money, which has many, many, many different secret symbols and patterns and meanings. And we actually made a whole analysis of that and turned the whole curtain, it's a double layer, into these same symbols, symbolizing the European Union. Chicago, Mies van der Rohe, but always looking for ways to have this contact with the exterior, and in many different projects. And breaking open, which I think is very important, also the architecture, breaking open views that normally wouldn't be there, and getting people to get in touch with, passers-by, to get in touch with what's going on inside, like exhibition on OMA in the 90s, and also in Chicago, working with the architects from the beginning and discussing the possibilities of making different levels or cracks or views so that actually the interiors become like landscapes. Opening up things so daylight comes in one way or another. So even if you have a darkening curtain like this one in Caen, in Normandy in France, it's a darkening curtain, dark enough for projections or whatever, but there is an idea of daylight or time. And that time and that information of, choosing a technique or a necessity, like here in the Casa Encendida in Madrid for shading, but at the same time trying to find a language that you communicate something. Here we are communicating the fact that Madrid is not a desert country, a desert city, but it actually is a plateau in the middle of fantastic natural conditions where we discovered it's one of the most important migrating birds' resting places. So we communicate here all the birds that are actually using and enjoying Madrid, and therefore representing nature. So opening up means also opening up views and giving suggestions of voyeurism or tension between what you can see and cannot see, or also in the landscape, cracking open a concrete floor of a parking lot, opening up the roof to a plaza, and then trees, grow through. So the force of nature also sometimes literally, opened up in the surfaces of architecture or, structure. Yeah, the whole is an important tool. We always speak of different tools that we use to create space or views or the illusion of space where there isn't any, or that it's vague what is inside and what is outside. And so mirroring surfaces are incredibly important tools. Day and night, therefore, are also different. When the lights go on inside, you have a totally different, of course, experience. And what is very important in the modern architecture, such as the Bordeaux house in Floirac, in France, is this black hole that you have at night. So if the light is gone and it is night, you have this very black, reflecting surface in your interior, and you see yourself and your whole interior in it. And so we are always looking for this very thin layer that could give you intimacy also when it is dark outside. So reflection and transmission of light in one way or another is very important. And testing it and creating surfaces that catches light, such as this in Haus der Kunst in Munich. So it is a curtain, but you can also, and it improves the acoustics, it's fire retardant, it answers to a lot of things, but it also can be used as a projection screen. And the first curtain I made that was really three-dimensional in a way is the Kunsthal in Rotterdam, where we also implemented the sound into the curtain, and where you see that here for the first time, the track is a very important part of the whole design. So the track here is for the first time, actually, as far as I know, integrated in the concrete ceiling. I was literally on top of the roof with the track people to bind it into the concrete matting, and then the concrete was poured on top. And so for the architect, Rem Koolhaas, it was very important to have the tiniest slit in this concrete ceiling, and that's what you then achieve. And the curtain itself unrolls and creates an auditorium, and it has sound inside it. So these little round things are actually speakers. So also in exhibitions, to create spaces or little rooms that are unexpected, or for the Harvard Piper Auditorium, Rothschild Bank, in a very, very transparent way, still create a room inside the building. So the tool is track and textiles, found textiles usually, things that already exist, from agriculture, from space technology, from fashion sometimes, and so on. So always looking what is useful on that specific place, in that specific building, but also in the city at this moment. It's all very specific per project and per space. But the track, to me, and the path are a bit the same tool, because with a path, traditionally, you create experiences through landscape. And the track is slightly different, but still with the track, you choreograph movement and you choreograph space, and you also influence the use by the user or of the space. And so the track can be very romantic and organic shaped, so that you can store a curtain in a certain form, as you saw also in the Kunsthal earlier. This is for the Chazen Museum, where we also designed the lamp. So you could imagine that the curtain rolls around the lamp, and the lamp starts to glow, and then you have a whole glowing sculpture instead of a piece of cloth. So the track, like here in Bordeaux, can go outside, so you can open your facade or window, and the curtain just moves into the landscape. And here it's a double track, also for paintings, art, And so in a very modern, at that time, very modern villa, you can hang a curtain and a painting in front, and you can shift them both from inside to outside. So a track can, like a path, be very efficient, going from one point to another in a very straight line. Like here in the Giardini di Porta Nuova park, we are almost finishing 10 hectares of land in the middle of Milan. And here, of course, this web of paths connects one area or one station to another place, one area to the other, and the station is nearby. And so we started to build it, and it's almost ready. So the whole idea of creating experiences like architects do in a building, and we are sometimes lucky that we can think with them, is in landscape very, very important and nothing new, but it's sometimes really fascinating to really create a line, even like this, a temporary line that connects, in this case, the Bois Bûcher castle to the forest, and it's a really long line, and it's probably now disappeared. But a path can also be lyrical and totally useless, in the sense that you could follow it, but a path can also just connect, places to one another and create gardens or moments that can be useful. And it can show where entrances and exits are. And a path can be shaded, formed by trees. And as we work and as we get more projects and experiences, we also discover the whole importance of fences. And fences have to do, of course, with security and with organizing space. It's like countries and any form of border that you cannot cross. And so in this case, for instance, we designed this fence like a curtain. It wallops, it meanders through the park design that we made, but it ignores the logics of the park. It's just a very meandering presence. And not only that, we also integrated seats in it so that people actually from two sides of this fence can communicate with one another. And we think that's a very important issue. Also, when we work in other countries where security is even more important, this whole idea here, you see the benches on both sides. So nobody knows who's inside and who's outside. Are you in or are you out? I don't know, but we can at least talk with one another. And we also have a project in Israel where the fence with high security is a very political and very important thing, but we managed for a project called the Hebrew House to convince the municipality of Rishon LeZion to integrate the security thing in a green room-like circumstance so that school children and people who visit the Hebrew Museum are using it as a space, as a friendly, growing, alive space. Then, of course, the materials for us are very important. The knowledge of what are you working with and how does it grow and how does it act and how does it change and how does it decompose, And how do the roots, what do they need, how do they grow, like this or like that? How high is it, how sensitive is your material, and how can you combine it? The whole idea of combining plants so they help each other is very important. Needless to say, we're also very much talking to architects and clients about the reuse of water, gray water, black water, and how nature can help clean water with their roots and with the whole cycle of taking up water and taking up can't say the word, but bad air and change it in good air. What you also have, the lungs in Mexico City are naturally very important. And in all these urban conditions, we're also always looking at how you can use natural materials in a very synthetic way, or the other way around, of course. And in different kinds of situations, like here in Shenzhen, where we designed both parks in full soil, but also the plazas, interior gardens, terrace gardens, you know, all kinds of conditions, and how you can use green in a very controlled way to absorb water, absorb rainwater, keep it on site, and use it for the planting, so you don't spend too much water, never more than necessary. So using graphics, indeed, I was hearing someone ask me, or ask Aura and me, what about your graphics? Well, it's of course a very powerful tool to realize that graphic design, or really using shapes and color, is very useful and can be three-dimensional or not three-dimensional. And here we used medieval European decorative vegetal forms to make a garden in China, actually connecting the two cultures of paper cut and European culture together. So you can do interventions with natural materials, but make it very like a carpet. So the word carpet is also in our work quite present. And for instance, in this New York situation where the forest is really old and very overgrown and wild, it's really interesting to create this counter movement, that you make a very synthetic but decorative, almost graphic garden. And garden can also be made of stone, like here at Casa de la Musica. So this is travertin, but it's shaped as the dunes near the sea, and in these shapes that people can use, there are hidden spaces underneath, a bus station, a little cafe, or it's cut out so you can sit in it. So stone can be seemingly really soft. Of course, you all know that. So in our interior work, we study materials in collaboration with architects to really know how to finish interiors to get certain effects, but also to influence acoustics. For instance, for the Mercedes-Benz Museum, we developed this brush wall. This is a test, but it became a whole wall as a background of a cafe, where the sound is actually not absorbed, but scattered. And we made a very reflective background so that the space actually doesn't end. For your idea, the space is continuous. And that is actually a bit of an obsession of mine, that you create illusion of space where there isn't any, and there is no boundary. You know, you have the feeling of endlessness. So knowledge of material, really looking all the time how you can use it and what it can have and how you can handle it. That is very important. And three-dimensionality and scale and all, you know, small scale, large scale, effects from far away, effects from really nearby. Still, you know, it should be one thing, but it has many layers and shapes. Sometimes nature takes over, as you can see. And for the Prada shop in New York, we knitted this sock ourselves, my assistant and me, 7 days of knitting in the Gramercy Park Hotel. It was great fun. We were starting to knit on each other's lap, and we knitted and knitted. We tore first this whole cloth and knitted for 7 days. And then we had a sock of 10 by 5 meters, which was hung around the audio system of the Prada shop. It's one of the hanging cupboards. So keeping on researching what you can do with curtains. Can you hang them outside? Can they collect sun energy? And also getting to know more and more all the techniques connected to curtains, how they move, how they are transported from one place to another. Quite heavy stuff, you know. It influences whole architectural structures. The weight of a curtain can be 500-600 kilos. And if you store it, all these kilos are, you know, massed up. And so everything needs to be considered also in the architecture, like as if you make a garden on a roof. It has to be calculated and connected. And then, of course, our dream is to really emancipate from architecture and talking about gravity, to really not need architecture anymore, which was a beautiful moment we had for a concert. And we were asked to make a background for a small chamber orchestra performance that went from one theater to the next. And how can you have the same sonography, in different spaces, high and low, small and large? So that was my introduction. And I'm afraid I can't make it in 19 minutes and 50 seconds. All right, so Villa Manin, Francesco Bonami asked us to create a pavilion in the garden of Villa Manin. And as you saw also maybe in the show in the city, we designed something that was typical for us, a mobile pavilion, a personal pavilion that was taken by the guests to the exhibition in Villa Manin, taken out into the garden, where they also saw we produced all these riflettuti ourselves, where they also encountered reflective sort of drops of polished stainless steel in the forest and in the shaded areas. And so here you see that this riflettuto is, you can carry it, it's translucent, it protects you from the sun, and we made holes in it to symbolize the organized view. And so the sun also makes little round shapes around your body, and it protected the visitors in the sun of the summer. And these mirroring drops actually created, of course, a special dimension because the trees seem to grow downward instead of upward. In Qatar, we finished a garden in this desert climate where they are very much used to do this kind of gardens. And of course, we thought this should not be done this time. For the Qatar Foundation headquarters by OMA, we developed an idea of using local plants, and we do that as much as possible generally. And so we did a lot of studies and met professors, and they gave us their books, and we read about it, and we went into the desert, and we learned that there are 15 different plant communities in the Qatarian desert. And so we made a system on a plateau, actually a roof of a parking lot, so not full soil, not a real garden situation, but actually a very synthetic situation. We created a system of planters, large to small, high to low, with these 15 plant communities collected in these different planters, spread over this plate, over the parking, and also opening up some of them to create staircases going down and trees growing through. And also thinking, as you saw in the sketch, the first sketch, a system of watering that was gradial, so from more water to no water at all. And from large to small, meaning a whole community of plants together, so grasses, shrub, tree, bulbs, and then less and less of them until there's only one left in the smallest planter. So these were all the way we presented it, and then discovered that, I think you might know, that you can't just go into the desert and get those plants. So it was a huge study how to get these plants, how to grow all these plants, how to find the seeds, how to multiply them. And there are very, very strict regulations in every country. You can't just pick it and do something with it. And so lots of these plants that were actually growing around the corner were coming from Spain and from California and from different countries, and also because the whole development of Education City in Doha, which is a whole new development, all initiated by Qatar Petroleum and Qatar Foundation, they didn't have their own nursery yet. So while we were working on this project, this whole nursery was being developed, and so slowly, slowly, all these plants were being, I don't know the English word, grown. So as this whole process went on, the whole building was being built, and the planters were being made. And of course, the planters are not just a bucket, but they have a whole drainage system. They had integrated lighting, integrated irrigation, but also the whole system of air intake and output of the parking was integrated in the planters. So the planters were, to me, it was important, or to us it was important, that the planters were kind of pure shapes covered in the travertin that later would also enter into the building. And the openings, also for fresh air, were used to create underground gardens with trees growing through the roof. And here you see the developments just planted. And of course, these trees have to grow. Everyone understands it will take, well, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years for things to grow. And that makes also our work so interesting, because in textiles, you have another timeline. As soon as you use textiles, it wears and it slowly disappears, depending how you use it. And in landscape, you have to grow things. So you start with nothing, and you need a lot of time and a lot of investment from many parties for the maintenance and for the protection of it. And here we are hoping that the University well, in Education City you have a lot of universities, of course, but also in Qatar, in Doha itself, that the universities, the botanic departments, the horticultural departments will sort of adopt this garden. And of course, the garden communicates the mentality of Sheikh Hamoza, who wants to communicate to the world the richness and the qualities of the Qatari culture and country. And not far from there is the National Library, also by OMA, where we were also asked to design the garden, this time in full soil garden and in full sun, I might add, and also curtains inside. And in the interior, it's a huge open space. OMA created a kind of bridge that flies over that open space, and on that bridge there are certain offices and uses, and at a certain point this bridge is cut open, let's say, and folds down and creates an auditorium where the seats are. And as we developed this whole interior garden through the years, we were also involved in this decision, like how do you create an auditorium if you not always want to have a closed volume there? So yes, it could be a curtain, and maybe you could make a beam that floats almost, and that follows the slope of the auditorium, and then hang a curtain on that. And that was going to be a competition with local artists and ourselves, and in the end we got the commission, and we were very proud. But I discovered something really terrible, is that I had the idea of having this sloping beam where the track would be connected to, but it also meant that the cloth, the curtain, would hang on a diagonal base. And you know that cloth will never hang beautifully from a diagonal position. And the worst is that, of course, a curtain has to open and close, so it goes from a straight position to a diagonal position to a straight position. And so I thought, how stupid can you be to think of such an idea? Now we have to solve it. So how can you develop a cloth, a textile, that can change its quality or its character in those different positions? So we went to the Textile Museum in Tilburg, in Holland, and we found a yarn which is actually a tree bark. It's a bit like raffia, and it's very slippery. It doesn't have a lot of, like wool or cotton or linen has a lot of little structures that holds each other. But this is very slippery. And so we developed a cloth that slides vertically, but that was held together in the horizontal sense. And that was a very long research. It took 2.5 years to find the right recipe of looseness and tightness so that it wouldn't fall apart. So there were ribs every 22 centimeters. You see it in these pictures that was woven much more densely so that it would hold the cloth together. And then you have a theme, again, the graphics. What does this curtain tell you? What is it? And so after a few propositions about language, about planting, about, it has to be abstract in a way, we chose for the stellar configuration in the sky at night above the desert, in a very Dutch way, very systematically organized, and a weaving technique. It's not a damast technique, it's called jacquard damast, but it has two sides. So we have a weave where it's not only positive, negative, so what is black here is white here, black here, but we have hidden yarns that made it possible to give the curtain two completely different colors. And so white and silver on the outside and black to dark blue on the inside. And then we discovered within the scale of this building that the design of only stellar system was actually in the scale much too small scale. It looked, if you saw it, we hang a lot of samples in the building itself. It looked as if it was a shirt. It wasn't very architectural or interesting. Then I discovered in the museum, the Islamic Museum, these measuring tools. And so, astrolabias, they're called, I think. And we photographed them and drew them and added them to the design so that you had a real new scale added to the curtain. Then translated into computer systems, every yarn, every weave stitch, as it were, was decided upon, and then it was made. And then, if you know maybe public buildings, the textiles you use have to be fire retardant to a certain level. And as we treated these hundreds of meters of cloth with this humid material, it turned out that it reacted really badly. It became like a sponge that, sucked up this whole humidity. And so it turned out we had to stretch every band of cloth. And the museum built all these kaders, these frames, to stretch it to dry, and it worked perfect. Then you have to roll it up because it has to be transported to a production company. Because you weave bands of cloth, but that doesn't make a curtain. And in this case, we had to connect all the bands of cloth horizontally to one another. And it had to be done in a very strategic way, because if you just stitch it together, the whole idea of this movement would be completely undermined. So we had a lot of tests that it was a kind of very loose way of connecting. Then Inside Outside draws all the recipes. It goes to Germany. It's being sewn together. It's tested, made, produced, tested again, transported to Qatar from Basel, and then hung and organized in the track, motorized track, seamed on the spot. And then after a few months, last year, December, I went back to test the whole motor system, how it, moves up and down. And then this is the final result, merging with its environment, hopefully. changing the acoustic at the interior, and representing the institution. And then if you look out of the window, there's a garden that looks after itself, with indentations, with a family, like a library, a family of agave and a family of acacia trees. And everything in this project was tested in a one-to-one test ground. Pieces of building, pieces of facade, interiors, but also the landscape elements. And then being built, fountain, rest. Slowly becoming something and opening up, the building officially coming April the 16th. Always something more to do. Then there are two entrances in this library, the main entrance and another entrance leading you down into the Heritage Library, which is underground and which has all the antique books of the collection. And there we created this landscape, this dry landscape, with sort of leftovers of the travertin that was used for the interior. Seen from the interior, and then leaving Qatar to its enormously quick developments. Okay, 4 minutes to go. I still need half an hour. Is that okay with you, or is that completely out of the question? Oh. Of course you can't answer. Can I ask? Huh? Anyway, in Rotterdam, like many other places, there is an architecture institute, and that architecture institute also owns a house of the early 30s, a modernist house by Dutch architects that also did the Van Elle Fabriek. And they built this house for a private owner, and it's now a museum house. And what happens traditionally is that then a museum house is furnished as it was furnished when people were still living there, and you can visit it and you can see how people live, like you would go to Frida Kahlo's house, etc. And I always have a double feeling about it, although I love it. I love to go, and I'm like a voyeurist looking at what little things they collected, and also at Ray and Charles Eames's house, it's fantastic to see. But there's also something weird about it, because they are not there anymore, And there are always things slightly changed, like these white voiles in front of the window. They are actually added later, and they are about UV and protection, etc. And the director of the NIE, the Architecture Institute, said, Petra, I am changing the policies. I'm going to ask artists to do an intervention in this museum house once a year. So 6 months an intervention of an artist or a designer, and 6 months it's back to its normal condition. And you're the second one I ask, and you can do anything with it. You can take away all the curtains and make new curtains or whatever. And I said, well, maybe not. Maybe I want to do what we always do, and that is react to the architecture. What is the essence here of the architecture? The essence of the period of this architect's, the realization of the house, is a nieuwe bouwen, which is licht, lucht en ruimte, which means light, air, and space. And it was very much influenced also by America. It's also about hygiene. So actually the whole architecture is about liberating and being healthy and having a connection to the outside. So actually I don't want to add anything. I just want to extrapolate what the essence of this architecture is. So we made this presentation, like, can we add mirrors to this whole building? And where shall we do it? And we made a whole mirroring floor on top of the original floor, temporary, of course, and meticulously so. so that you would really go under each heating and under each cupboard. Everywhere there is now mirroring plates, not stainless steel, of course, but the kind of foil on top of a PVC plate. And so that you would discover all the secrets of the architecture, but also the secrets of this whole museum concept. Because underneath each table and each chair, you saw the whole, the security system, and you saw all the signs of borrowing it to different museums, etc. So you were actually realizing that it's all a scenography and not real life. And we took away these voiles, these curtains, and so daylight really splashed in and created all these very weird effects and light effects that were completely surprising, and also added some mirrors in the garden, actually changing the whole modernist architecture in a sort of Gaudian architecture. Casa da Musica, curtains, knotted. I'm going to go through it really quickly because I don't want to eat up your time too much. But there we made lots of curtains, and also the whole finishes of the interior. So enlarging the drawing of the wood and changing it into gold leaf pattern that would catch the light. And so the curtains together with all these finishes had a nice game together. And all the curtains have a different role. One is darkening, one is absorbing, one is view filtering, one is etc. So they all have their different roles, and they all disappear in hollow walls or hollow ceilings without a sound. The openings shutting soundlessly or vertically or horizontally. Unbelievable collaboration with the whole team. So engineers, architects, designers, etc. And of course, what you don't see is in all the rooms downstairs where the orchestras are training and testing everything that we have there. Also more technical curtains with windows so that the technical people from the rooms, where they influence the sound, can see what's going on downstairs. And all the finishes, acoustic finishes, traditional tiles, using local techniques, etc. And the plaza I was talking to you about, where the stone all of a sudden becomes a soft landscape. And a very simple way of connecting, which I also told you in the beginning, is for a campus site where we won a competition for the outside spaces, a faculty with different faculties like you would have here, different faculties, different buildings of different architects, and it's being all refurbished, redone, improved. And it used to be a very shut area where nobody entered. And we thought it would be really nice. It's in the center of Amsterdam. That's why I showed you this image. And so it's actually a follow-up of all the canals. And we decided to use exactly the same traditional brick and natural stone and lighting system and just continue it, with that change that the white bricks usually used for zebras, we would use to create a very romantic ribbon that would connect all the site together and all the faculty buildings together, also showing all the entrances and exits so that students, thousands of students, of course, could also find their way and recognize, because of all the different conditions, recognize where they are going. And sometimes there are these secrets inner gardens that would just be taken up in this system of meandering paths. And these white bricks, create a different world with naturally plantings that change with the season. And what I always think is you can design what you want on paper, but once it's being built and you don't have a real great influence as a designer on who's going to build it and what contractor is being asked. So you need to be on site to prevent this kind of horrors that you think, my God, you know, how are they making this? It should be done better and more precise, and it's always a huge process, as all architects know. It can, this kind of project, like Casa da Musica, like Seattle, like Doha, like, they take 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. The park in Milan that I showed you, we won it in 2004. We got our first contract in 2010, and we are now finishing it. So it's one park. And here you see aerial pictures where you really see in reality how these ribbon binds things together and creates areas for use and enjoyment. And then you have to hold your heart because the students are taking over. And you hope everything will survive. Okay, curtains can also be a background. Here in an exhibition in the Beaubourg, we were asked to create a curtain inside already almost existing design to an overview of Pierre Paulin. Pierre Paulin, a French furniture designer, 50s, 60s, 70s until 2000 something, unfortunately died a couple of years ago. And this curtain we made to really be the background of these different phases of his work. So very simple materials, plastics, fake leather, but very, very, you know, not really any character, but treating them in slightly different ways so that you, through those very little interventions, you do see, for instance, here it's the 50s where we made little pleats in this translucent, it's actually projection material, so that you do symbolize something of that specific time. Translucent, but still leading the visitor through that space from one moment to another. Always views, always breaking open. I can't help it. And then creating some darker space for projections and film. And using, lacquer and actually colorless, but playing with reflectivity and materiality, because Pierre Paulin made fantastic furniture, very sensual, very about color and material. And so we played with that. Walker Art Center, garden, shaping a garden on top of Herzog and de Meuron's parking lot, very, very not completely naturally made, as you can see. It's a lot of foam because the parking lot didn't have the force to keep this hill that we imagined to really give this, it's a landscape that is now like this, was like this, the garden is done, but we made it three-dimensional, and so we worked with engineers and architects to create this hill, lightweight, and so our imagination of this view became reality. Inviting people up, giving different views to the city and from the city to the garden of the Walker Art Center. Beautiful building, 2 buildings coming together. Showing the parking, so using trees to actually continue the galleries of the museums in the same scale and creating rooms with trees that can be used for different programs. And the path, again, also as a continuation of Herzog and de Meuron's paths inside that were quite irregular from thin to thick and wide to narrow. And so here it was really important to use topography to make space, to give it a spacious feel and also an effect from within the museum looking out. and also, as you see here, also a bit hiding ugly buildings on the back. And all these trees creating different rooms. James Turrell installation. So here these square or rectangular rooms becomes a carpet, and that carpet embraces Turrell's installation, and you could sort of walk through. And in front of the museum where Herzog and de Meuron's entrance was, where nobody could really recognize the entrance, we also changed the hard surface into more landscape surface. And the whole hill was strategically planned because a few times a year they have these enormous concerts where thousands of people come. And so the whole hill, the shape of it and the placement of these rectangular rooms was strategically planned to offer the best view to where the concert was taking place. Okay, I think I have to stop because I am sure you're very tired. No. Okay, Private House Bordeaux. You're responsible for this. Okay, I'll go back a bit. So we worked with Rem Koolhaas and his team on this private house. And I think it was really the beginning of 2000-something. And I was collaborating on the interior and the garden. It wasn't a garden, it was actually a forgotten forest on top of a hill overlooking Bordeaux. And it was completely overgrown, 40 years. So this is after our intervention, but it was, you couldn't even get in. We had to take manchetes to go in, and we built a scaffolding to see where the house should come to see the view of Bordeaux and its beautiful river. But okay, in the end, so the only thing that the landscape design was doing was opening up and creating views and using the earth that was taken out to make the building as a tool for topography. And here you see that track again that changes direction. Here you see the drawing that the track goes outside on the terrace. In the younger stage, all kinds of curtains on the terrace inside, reflecting the interior, reflecting the landscape. And then after 12 or 15 years, the owner, who became a friend, called and said, you know, can you come back and can you restore the curtains and can you also add more? Because I'm getting a bit older and I feel a bit cold inside sometimes. So can you, together with me, see what we can do? For instance, in this large living area, there's never a place. I don't know how to organize the furniture. So we made this carpet, and I don't know if you know, but OMA created this fantastic room that went up and down for Mr. Lemoine, who was handicapped after a car accident, and he wanted to have a very complex house and not a house for handicapped. So they actually were inspired by the boats in Rotterdam that come by and that transport all the goods. And you know, the captain has this little captain's house, and it goes up and down through a pneumatic system. So this square is starting downstairs in the kitchen and the wine cellar, goes up to the living room, goes up to the bedroom. And so the carpet has to bind it together, and yet not really. And we made new curtains that were a bit less ephemeral and so more visible, but with a window and a slit moving out, moving in the wind. A mosquito curtain added for the outside. There was a lot of storm, you can see that, creating semi-protected space. And then in the bedrooms, curtains that would not be completely dark, but would really choose the window and then make a kind of floating mass in front of where the light would come from. Another bedroom. darkening yet always in connection with the light outside. And we did a beautiful, I don't know actually, I'm not the one to say, but we had a very beautiful commission from curators in Zurich for the Luma Foundation. They were going to do an exhibition in the Luma Foundation in Zurich, and they wanted us to think of screens or curtains that would divide one large space in different galleries, as we also did with curtains for the ETH gallery at the faculty. And so we got all the works that they were going to show, and we made a whole drawing and analysis, what it was, how big, how it needed to be hung, made a model, of course, and thought of screens that would be really thin and totally transparent, so that all the works would actually stay in touch with one another, although each of the galleries, let's say, would have a certain theme or subject, yet always in touch with one another. So we thought of a screen that would be the thinnest possible profile, and then envelop it with the plastic you use in the kitchen, you know. So it sticks to itself, and you create this thing, this kind of membrane. The membrane. And the beauty of it was that it's not just static, it has these little wrinkles, as you can see, and these wrinkles, they were moving as people were passing. It was like water. So it opened, it was hung, and it had all these strange effects. Hardly there, yet there. All right, so we're now working on a lot of other things. We work for the Dutch train company, creating screens throughout the train, and it's all based on sound waves. We work on a holiday park where a 70s generation father gave his whole land to his son, and his son wants to change this whole holiday thing into a more sustainable and natural landscape where people come and go. And so we were asked to do that landscape. Very interesting, never done before. And we're also working in Berlin to create a glass house in an attic of an old hospital. This was the attic that we visited. The Israeli developer said, Petra, you have to make this attic more interesting. I'm going to make apartments in it, and can you design it? And I said, of course I can design it, but of course I'm not an architect, and I've never designed anything like that. So I asked Aura Melis, who you met, to join my team and to create something like a glass house that would just break into this attic, which is on top of a whole hospital, as you might have seen. And we did scale comparisons and discovered that Philip Johnson's glass house fitted perfectly. So we said to the owner, can we make a glass villa inside? And he liked it, and he also liked the whole idea that there would be a garden around it. So we're working on that with Arab engineers. And I said to Arab, you know, it's easy. We can just break these wooden columns and you just replace it by steel. And, you know, the steel will lead the whole weight down to the columns, etc. Like Lina Bobardi, it should be easy. They said, yes, it's very easy, but it's enormous intervention. But it's being built. And to end, I would like to show this, which is also the Biennale in Venice, but in 2012, where we were asked to represent the Netherlands in the architectural biennial. Now you can imagine I was very honored, because as you know, Inside Outside is not an architectural studio. And Ole Baumann, who was director at the time, said, Petra, can you represent beauty? And I thought, I said, no, of course not. I cannot represent, nobody can represent beauty. What is beauty? And what is who am I, to represent beauty? It's not possible. Don't you have something like we always have, some practical concept or some practical theme? And he said, yes, the theme then will be how to re-liven, how to re-inhabit empty architecture, because it's a scandalous situation everywhere. Well, lots of architects talk about it, and rightly so. There are empty or half-ready or not completed buildings. In this case, the Rietveld Pavilion, a monument, and they are not inhabited. So can you symbolize inhabitants in a way that everywhere you could do that? And so we developed a system of curtains, or actually a piece of cloth. Actually, no, we developed a system of tracks with motors, little motors, and a piece of cloth, and a certain shape of this track, so that that piece of cloth could move through the Rietveld Pavilion in certain ways, that it would create 12 different kinds of rooms. And these 12 different forms and shapes of rooms would really symbolize different ways of use. So it could be a hairdresser, or a church, or an auditorium, or whatever you like. It changes from rectangle to round to triangular, etc. What we also did was open up all the windows, and so that the light of the sun could come in, not protected, and also added mirrors on top of the roof to catch the sun and to create two timelines. So the real sun would go from east to west, and the catched sun would go from west to east, so you had two timelines. So 12 positions, 12 hours of the day and 12 hours of the night, and the shifting time with the light and the shadows. Working with Geritz GmbH, German company that we work with very often, this kind of amazing drawings to create this what looks like a very simple Meccano-like system. We took away all the lamelles of the ceiling, and the track system was attached to it. And then the piece of cloth was actually not a design, but a kind of added up things that have to do with all the curtains we had made up to that moment. It integrated architectural language of vertical division, horizontal division, view, obstruction of view, reflection, absorption, lightweight, heavy, etc. Color, non-color. And so that added up made a piece of cloth, and that cloth was hung. And then we tested it, and there was no sound. And I said to the people who made it, Geritz GmbH, why doesn't it make any sound? Because it's a bicycle track. It's a bicycle chain. It should go tick, 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 tick. And they say, no, it's perfect. It's perfectly made. So it goes zzz. So I was very disappointed. And we worked with a lot of guys from Holland, and they were building it up, and we had lunch and pizza. And I said, so what do you normally do? What do you do? Well, I'm an artist. What do you do? I'm a writer. And then the third one said, I'm a composer. Oh, have you heard of Tinguely and this kind of sculpture that have mechanic sound? Yes. Can you do something so that there will be sound? And he made these found things, and he connected it in between the tracks so that when the curtain, and you see the fingers on the curtain, so as it passed, it would go tick, 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 or you'll hear later. So I was happy again. So here you see some images, and I want to finish with the film. And one of the statements, I think, was not only what Ole Baumann asked me, but also a bit of a comment on the museum culture at the moment, that you always have explanations everywhere. And here there were no explanations at all. And also a bit on a comment on time. So I was telling you about the time issue, but also nobody has time anymore. So the positions change, but if you don't stay, you don't know what happens. So people come in and out and in and out, but each time they come in, there's a different configuration. But if you stay, you can see the whole thing changing. And now I want to tell you, you don't need to stay. It takes 10 minutes. I'm not sure you can handle it. Let's see. I think it's going slower than any time I saw it before. I can imagine you're laughing. It's really strange. It's kind of sadistic, isn't it? Well, there is a moment that people enter and you see the scale and people interacting with the curtain. We should check it out. Anyway, thank you so much for your attention.
Les informamos que esta tarde a las 7 tendremos una mesa de diálogo en el Museo de Arte Popular, donde se abordará el tema Siglo XXI, siglo de la reforma urbana. Cerramos el primer bloque de conferencias. A continuación tendremos un receso y volveremos a las 4 de la tarde para continuar con el segundo bloque. Les agradecemos que sean puntuales.